Okay, start.
Oh, hello, I'm Linda.
Hey, I'm Shannon.
I'm Nakesta.
Hey, Terra.
I'm Terra. I said it, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. We're doing team interviews, and we're going to start in on everything that we've learned so far, starting with Linda. What is the definition of area, and how do you find the area in a circle?
The definition for area is the amount of space inside of the boundary of a flat two-dimensional object, such as a triangle or a circle or a surface of a solid of a three-dimensional object. While learning about misleading graphs, we also learned about the area. You could find the area when you multiply pi times the radius square. And one example that I wanted to use is if the diameter is 10, you would divide 10 divided by 2 and get 5. You would multiply 5 times 5 and then get 25. And then you will multiply pi, which is 3.14 by 25, and your area would be 78.45. And I used this when I was trying to get the area for our Terra graph, and I was trying to get the both areas of the big circle, the small circle, and ultimately we got the percentage in the end for that. Wow. That's all I got to say about that.
Awesome.
What does it mean to have a skewed data?
Okay, for a chart to have skewed data, it has no standard measure of deviation. In this chart that we see of average family incomes, this means that more Americans have a higher income than the median or middle income of the chart. If the chart is skewed to the left, it is negatively skewed. If it's skewed to the right, it is positively skewed. Skewed data can also be undefined as either positive or negative. So Shannon, will you elaborate on your analysis for misleading groups and charts?
I would love to. Surveys, research, and data are useful tools to demonstrate the proposal or the objective being discussed. However, some might be tempted to falsify or inaccurately inflate information to slant the results in their favor or create bias. Graphs can mislead the viewer if the starting place data is skewed to manipulate the outcome. The Terra graph, for example, was measured by using a replica of the same shape right over here and inputting the size and shape's properties. Next, a formula was used to calculate the percentage by using pi and then multiplied by half of the diameter to compute the radius. It was then divided by the same formula used to determine the size of the smaller shape to determine its percentage. This was just one way to discover the inaccuracy because the percentage was off. Other ways data might be skewed would be flawed questionnaires, for example, leading questions that would be biased or leave response choices that aren't mutually exclusive in nature. Additionally, poorly executed interviews by the interviewer. An example would be not asking questions correctly or thoroughly enough, and asking questions in an inconsistent or unstandardized, unneutral manner. Terra, what have you learned about this data that reports represented in the bar graphs?
Well, I have learned that charts can be very misleading depending on the set point of the y-axis. Many charts shown on the news or other informational sites could be misleading towards a certain bias. Here we have a list of bowlers and their scores on this table. On this chart shown, the bowlers' scores do seem to have a big difference, but when actually charted with the set point of 0, the information relative to the table is not misleading, and you can see the scores are closer to each other than previously thought. When you see a graph or chart, you cannot take it for face value until you actually chart the information for yourself.
Awesome.
Nakesta, what is the relation between the mean and the median?
Well, an important relationship between a mean and a median can be distinguished by the screwness of the data. For a set of data, if means equal median, then it is symmetric. It is a symmetric distribution. If the means is greater than the median, then it would be screwed to the right, which is positive. And if the means is less, then it would be screwed to the left on the negative side.
Gotcha. Linda, what's an X input and a Y output, and how was this helpful?
Okay. The X is the independent variable, and the Y is the dependent variable. And X is also the domain, and the Y is also considered the range. And we could both use these to find the profits from the sales. So actually, the Y is dependent. It depends on the independent, which is the Y, to get the information from.
Gotcha.
Okay. Shannon, can you explain what is happening in the intercepts and the vertex of Elon's new flamethrower business?
Certainly. So here we see a pattern in the rise and fall of the profit margin since its inception. The x-axis represents the input or the number of sales, and the y-axis represents the output or the profit. The initial investment of $12,000 is represented here in the y-axis. The bottom dollar mark down here of $69,880 is represented in the amount of items that were sold before the business took a turnaround and started its uphill climb towards making a profit. The break-even point lies just above, right here at the intersecting x-axis, and is represented in the chart somewhere around the 203 mark, where the business finally emerges out of the red and into the black and actually starts making money. So the amount of the flamethrower that Elon had to sell to make the turn of profit was $90,000 from the 203 mark rather, up to the 260,000 sold.
So
Terra, what have you learned about the break-even point starting a business?
Well, when starting a business, it takes an initial investment before profits can be made. The point when your profits go from a negative number to a positive number is the break-even point. The total profit at that point is zero. This means that the business has the same amount of profits as expenses. And you can see in the chart from flamethrower sales, profits continue to go into the negative until roughly about 203 flamethrowers are sold, and that would be the break-even point.
Gotcha.
Linda, what does standard deviation mean, and how is it used in math?
Okay, standard deviation is a measure of how spread out numbers are. It is the square root of the variance, and the variance is the average of the square difference from the mean. To calculate the variance, work out the mean. Then for each number, subtract the mean and square the results. Then work out the average of those square differences. We use standard deviation and mean to look at the average sleeping patterns in the sleeping study. Okay, Terra, can you explain the standard deviation?
Sure. Okay, in these two charts, we have plotted the height of 9 Army recruits in inches. By calculating standard deviation, we see that we have about 4 inches difference between the recruits. The standard deviation is a measurement that shows the average difference of the data in the table and the mean. Since we have a relatively low standard deviation, that means that most of the heights are close to the average. This is also shown by the tightness of dots in the scatter chart and against the trend line, and also in the relatively small width of the bar in the box and whisker chart. Shannon, What would happen if the standard deviation shifted in a data set?
Excellent question. Standard deviation is a quantity calculated to indicate the extent of deviation for a group as a whole. The mean or average would change by the same amount as the constant, but the standard deviation will remain unchanged. When there's a shift in distribution, either up or down, it doesn't affect the distance between values. The standard deviation is equal to the square root of the difference between the average or the mean of the values of the square and the average value. So when a sample size increases, the standard deviation or the means decreases. And as the sample size decreases, the standard deviation of the sample means increases.
Gotcha.
Nakesta, what is a median?
A median can be used in a set of data. It is a number that is halfway in a set. Some call it a middle number. A median can be used in different types of data. It is the value separating the higher half from the lower half of a list of data.
Okay.
Linda, what does the means, median, and range means?
Okay, the mean is the average number. A calculator the central value of a set numbers. To calculate it, add all the numbers, then divide by how many numbers there are. The median is the middle of all sorts list of numbers. To find the median, place the numbers in a value order and find the middle number. The range is the difference between the lowest and the highest value. Range can also mean all the output values in a function. Nakesta, how would you explain the mean?
How would I explain the mean? Well, good question. The mean is is the central value of a set. It is easy to calculate. Just add all the values together, then divide the number of values in the set. The results will be the mean.
Gotcha.
Terra, what kind of charts can you use to plan your future expenses?
Well, pie charts and bar graphs are a good way to chart expenses. By putting your monthly expenses in a visual format, then you can see which of your expenses take the most of your budget. In this example, the monthly mortgage is even at 23% with the other, or the amount left over. Food is a close second at 17%. By looking at these, you can see if you're trying to save money and moving isn't feasible to cut costs, you would want to find a way to cut down on your monthly food bill.
Interesting.
Okay, Linda, what are budgets and how do you make one?
Okay. A budget is an estimate of revenue and expenses over a specific period. In my case, I created a table with all my family's estimate income in the future. I now then made a list of all my expenses and subtracted from my family's total income. Any money, budgets are unnecessary expenses, and your budget is more near the negative marker, then you would be rethinking your budget strategies.
Shannon, how would you explain the importance of a well-executed budget forecast?
A well-outlined and executed budget provides a visual reference and a clear approach to executing and maintaining your goals for the future. Whether it be a 1-year, a 5-year, or a 20-year goal, it's important to be able to see the inflow and outflow of funds. This allows us to forecast our future, and having a solid plan in place enables you to downplay any unexpected expenses. So knowing exactly where all of your money is allotted enables you to have a storehouse set aside for things like college funds, vacations, home improvements. So financial freedom is attainable with some discipline and concrete goals. As you can see, once they're laid out here, it gives you a better visual for mapping out your future. What's another way you would plan a monthly budget, Nakesta?
Well, when it comes to planning a good budget, I like to make a list of all my expenses. Sometimes I overestimate my expenses to make sure I'm over and not under. Then when I make a list of all the income I have coming in. After I'm done, I usually subtract it to see what's left over.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Linda, what are percentages and what are some ways they can be helpful?
Okay, percentages is a rate, number, or an amount in each 100. Percentage can be extremely useful when dealing with large numbers. It could also be useful when you want to get an idea in how big or small something is by comparing percentages. We can use percentages when we deal with money, food, banks, or even buying a home. We use percentages in our lives every day. For example, in this graph, it shows percentages of speed. Instead of having numbers on the graph, it's easier to replace the speed of numbers to percentages. Percents are important in our world. If you look closely, I'm 100%, you'll find yourself using percentages in your everyday life.
That's true.
Okay. And Shannon, what is your probability of having type 2 diabetes?
So this can be answered with probability factors and statistics like the examples listed here. The data represented is the American population as it's broken down into those who are affected by the health issues of, in this particular case, obesity, type 2 diabetes, and high blood pressure. The data is sorted in what's known as a Venn diagram according to the ailment or combination of ailments, respectively. A Venn diagram shows all of the possible logical relations between a finite collection of the different sets. So here we see that 10 million Americans, or 3.1% of the population, struggles with obesity, 9% dealing with obesity and type 2 diabetes, and likewise 9% struggle with obesity and high blood pressure. Arkansas happens to rank as 7th in this nation. It could likely be attributed to several factors such as income, poor diets, social factors. What part of the country you live in would determine the food culture, for example. Some of these are linked to certain conditions or like stressors has been linked to high blood pressure. So to answer this particular question, according to the data that is listed here, I have a 10.5% probability of having type 2 diabetes. How did you find the median here with the data and the graph on, or the chart on here, Nakesta?
Well, to find the median, I first organized all the data by sorting the numbers. When I sort the numbers from low to high, it makes it easier for me to find my middle number. The middle number is the median. Then I crossed out all the outer numbers to better help me find the middle number, which is 72.
Got it.
Terra, can you explain that scientific notation? Oh, I'm sorry. Can you explain what scientific notation is and how it is used?
Scientific notation is a way to abbreviate very large and very small numbers. Instead of writing out the number, you can move the decimal until you have a number between 1 and 10. That number times 10 and raised to the power that you move the decimal becomes the scientific notation of that number. If you have a number less than 1, you will have a negative exponent, as we see here in the scale of the universe. And the letter E is how that's noted on a calculator. E simply means 10 to the power of. And what's the best way to make a time schedule, Nakesta?
First, I make a list of all the things I plan on doing. I try not to take on more than I can handle. So I try to put breaks in between things. For example, like after work or after working out for an hour, I'll give myself 30-minute break or so. Even if I don't use the break, I still save that time for unexpected things like running errands or emergencies. And after I make the list, I try to stick to it for all my personal and career goals.
Shannon, can you assess the value or importance of using graphs, charts, and tables to explain the data in these projects?
Absolutely. So graphs, charts, and tables provide visual reference and support the data being presented or interpreted. For example, you can use the tables, formulas to substantiate the statistics or measurements of the data. The pie charts and graphs are extensions of the data, and they are linked to the corresponding tables and offer additional perspective on the material being discussed. They're important tools to convey information and make sense of data. One such example is the dietary report that we have right here, and it provides quantitative information and can aid in the qualitative research. So qualitative research is concerned with the why, and the quantitative research that we have here answers the what. So it determines the motivating factor behind the information being discussed. So to wrap it up, on behalf of myself and Terra and Nakesta and Linda, we want to thank y'all for being here, and we hope that you learned something today.
Thank you. Bye. Phew.
I think we made it.
All right. Thanks, girl.
Yes. Now, I'm going to figure out how to get this thing uploaded on YouTube. And we can be done.
Perfect.